Hello, and welcome to the 10th episode of the ESG Experience podcast brought to you by Gobi, the ESG platform. I'm Helee, Gobi's Chief Revenue Officer.
And I'm Ryan Nelson, Gobi's CEO, and we're your hosts for this podcast.
Whether you're an ESG expert or just dipping your toe in the ESG universe to understand how it can help with engaging stakeholders, mitigating risk, and attracting investors, this podcast is for you. Together, we'll navigate the alphabet soup of ESG, discuss ideas, review strategies, and share industry news and trends. In today's episode, we are going to be discussing how a multidimensional business works to integrate ESG into a company that's traditionally very siloed. And we're pleased to be joined by Laura Coy, Head of Philanthropy Strategy and ESG Integration at William Blair. Welcome, Laura.
It's nice to be here with you both.
Yes, great to have you.
Go
ahead. You go ahead.
I was going to embarrass Laura with her bio, but first I wanted to welcome her. So a bit about our guest today. Laura is a seasoned philanthropy, ESG, and citizenship professional with more than 20 years of experience building programs, partnerships, community, and sustainability initiatives. William Blair is the premier global boutique with expertise in investment banking, investment management, and private wealth management. At William Blair, ESG factors are among many considerations that inform their investment decisions, inextricably linked with their fundamental assessment of the quality of corporate management and sustainable value creation potential. Welcome. We're happy to have you, and impressive background, which is how you landed a spot on today's podcast, because we don't mess.
It's a journey.
Well, and I guess you could say, I've heard of William Blair, and I'm somewhat familiar with William Blair, but I did not realize how multidimensional the organization is, and certainly that's what leads to the complexity and what we're excited to hear how you've kind of approached that. But you said the journey, always excited about the journey and learning a little bit about the personal journey. Would love to hear your story and your career path a little bit. I really enjoyed kind of following along in LinkedIn and see the kind of commitment to philanthropy thread almost all the way throughout your career. So how did you arrive here?
Yeah, great question, Ryan. I had a little bit of some inside scoop into this industry. My dad was in corporate philanthropy in the 70s for John Deere. And it made an impression on me, and I'll tell you why. Back then there was probably a predisposition for CEOs to be generous, to write checks and to give some earnings back to charitable causes that might have been, purely personally motivating. But what I recall was also witnessing how more companies were thinking about philanthropy as a way to do good with what they're good at doing, or to create pipelines of product innovation or customer relationships that would create shared value, of which John Deere, obviously looking at the farming and agriculture industries, created a program to partner with the 4-H to develop a future farming population and to really foster the small farming agriculture businesses that were being lost at that time. And now you kind of take a look at, I was just peeking at their corporate social responsibility report and their sustainability report the other day, and you look at that trajectory from the 70s to 2022, where they're developing tractor equipment with artificial intelligence and capabilities of anticipating climate and mitigating safety issues across the globe. It was fascinating. And then I think you couple that, I had a political science degree, very intrigued with society and its intersection with government, and how I think back in the 90s, we kind of started using the term public-private partnerships and the importance of building those to solve complex social issues, which quite honestly, I think is what evolved today into ESG. So I've always been fascinated with the roles that the different entities, whether that be government, public sector, private sector, individuals themselves play in that role. And I think what's been interesting is looking at it and then actually working with those different functions. So I spent a good chunk of my early career as a fundraiser, helping organizations advancing health, science, and environmental initiatives raise the philanthropic capital they needed, and then migrated that expertise to help a large publicly traded company develop some operational and strategy around their philanthropy that evolved pretty quickly into Granger's first corporate social responsibility report, an enterprise-wide ESG function. And we'll talk a little bit about the importance of an enterprise-wide perspective, I think, later, because I don't think William Blair is unique in that there's several different departments that are working with different stakeholders on the same problems, but with different resources.
Yeah, the kind of big picture philanthropy journey overall, it's very interesting to me how, kind of like you said, it's the CEO of a company, and then what is that person interested in doing or something. The fact that a company has a point of view in philanthropy, and that now has become a mature type thing that you do in a very intelligent way, and all of your employees probably participate in it in some way. It's very, very interesting that philanthropy is for companies to perform and not just individuals to take on. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, one might say, like, I think there has been a little bit of a convergence of US based companies really using philanthropy as the anchor to their ESG, whereas in Europe, a more regulated, climate oriented environment, we kind of talk as professionals sometimes about how the best in class of both geographies has come together into this summation of an integrated ESG approach using a different toolkit of resources. So it's an absolutely amazing evolution.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, in our comings and goings, whether working with customers or peers in the industry, I have not seen, even just within your title of head of philanthropy strategy and ESG being coupled together. And it looks like that was fairly recent, for you as far as just title wise. But now that you've explained it, the intersection of the two totally makes sense. And it's a unique way to look at it, but a logical way for sure.
Yeah, and a lot of that too is just, if you think about it, at an enterprise level, right? Like there's so many resources that we have at our disposal as a business. And at the same time, there are so many different stakeholders appropriately demanding this, whether that be a client or an employee or a community stakeholder. So that integration, I think, is both strategic, but it's also like, then how do we share what we learn? Because there's this balance of walking the talk. So you can be very commercial around your ESG approach, and you can be very authentic. And I think those two go hand in hand, which is we kind of think about that integration as a bit of a center of excellence. So whatever we're learning and applying to our own business, we are then sharing with our customers and communities, so they can derive the benefit of what our challenges are, what our learnings are, what our successes are, what our failures are.
Yeah, I love that. And it makes sense. I think you guys have done a good job. You're upstanding of when you say walking the walk. So you're not just putting it out there. It's not greenwashing. It does come back to the core of, who William Blair is, what you guys are trying to do, and your sphere of influence, which is really awesome and admirable. So that being said, you guys have been at this for a while, and, perhaps you're a leader in the space. And in your role, what are some ESG data trends that have stood out for you? And I say data trends, either good or bad, or ones that are, logical or not. I was on a call yesterday with a private equity firm who said, you know what? I don't like scoring. I don't like scoring with an ESG. I don't like peer ranking with an ESG. It motivates the wrong behavior. But from our perspective, without the scoring, without the teeth, without the KPIs, without the data trends, it is hard to measure improvement or measure impact. What do you think?
You said at the beginning, alphabet soup, right? When I was at Granger, I was in the investor relations department. And, that was oh my gosh, it was the tsunami of the different ratings and rankings, and each having their own individualized approach of accessing either, publicly available data or not, and creating a score based upon those available data points or interpretation of. I'm excited about data. So I can't believe I just said that. I think there's some great trends in data. The two things in particular, and I think MSCI just put out a report today on trends to look out for, but the consolidation of how reporting frameworks are working together. Because I got to tell you, earlier in my career, where it was purely kind of the ESG professional responding to inquiries and compiling the reports to achieve those scores for a publicly traded company. You'd answer the same questions 5 different ways, or some rating agencies were looking at particular data points and others weren't. So there's this consolidation that's happening. Is very hopeful, because at the end of the day, you don't want a company to waste time on responding. You want them to be actually focused on the ESG priorities that are going to make a material impact on their business in the world. And that's my second hopefulness around data, is that notion of materiality, and the acknowledgement from the rating agencies that, of course, every single priority within ESG is important. But when you look about, going back to that notion of doing good of what you're good at doing, the other perspective on that is what is really material to your business, and where can you make a difference? If you're a manufacturer, that might be supply chain. If you're a financial services firm, it's largely based on human capital. So that notion of materiality and how that's manifested, and Gobi's just been a tremendous partner for us in that pursuit, is something I'm very hopeful about, and it resonates. And I think actually you're putting the resources in where the meaning is.
Yeah, well, at Gobi, we very proudly get excited about data. So you're in good company there, and you don't have to be shy about that. But yeah, you're exactly right. It's great that everybody is mobilized around capturing data and turning it into information. But the idea of very quickly operationalizing that and getting past that effort and all the energy being in talking about how much data you have into actually doing material things, finding out what's material, and then executing on it and becoming more strategic and building tactical plans from that strategy. So that's obviously what we're trying to do, is make that operationalize the challenging part, so the real value can be the focus. So let's talk about William Blair's journey to a sustainable future and impact investing. Of course, at William Blair, you serve a diverse set of clients and stakeholders and provide distinct services and perspectives across business lines. Tell us how your commitment to sustainable and responsible investing manifests itself differently in each part of the business. And I'll kind of rattle 4 of those off here for a second: investment management, private wealth management, investment banking, and research and institutional sales. Multidimensional.
Multidimensional, yes. It's a little bit of everything, which is why this is such an amazing place to be focused on this work, to be honest with you. And I might not go in that order, but we'll touch on all those different constituencies and stakeholders. Because if we think about, private wealth management, for us, those are high net worth families, individuals, family office level clients who are really thinking about, obviously, their personal assets and the purpose of that capital. If you think about the employment of ESG considerations into how you manage those assets, I mean, that's everything from, gender lens investing, to, looking at maybe, taking out certain equities who aren't performing to your values-based or ESG priorities that you set forth, or really kind of just defining the purpose of your capital. I work a lot with our clients who are philanthropically inclined. So a good example of that might be a family that has a foundation, and they're funding climate change. And they have a 5% minimum distribution requirement that they're achieving and probably exceeding every year in their grant making, but maybe they haven't looked at the corpus of those philanthropic dollars to see if that value transcends into both what they're investing in their communities, as well as the companies or the types of capital that they're investing to make those grants. on the investment management side, which is really our institutional business and managing institutional money, it's twofold. It's obviously prioritizing that with our clients, large state pension funds or international funds that they themselves are prioritizing ESG and looking to partner with companies that are doing so, as well as taking a proprietary perspective on the buy side as well, which William Blair has built out quite magnificently. And they've got an amazing team of leaders within investment management that are leading their department's ESG integration. And then you think on the research side, right, covering more than 600 publicly traded companies, why not use a similar philosophical approach to elevating what companies are doing that are very positive in their ESG strategy and helping those companies succeed? So it's pretty exciting. And then, of course, investment banking, we can kind of get into that a little bit more too. But there is a huge rise in the value proposition around companies that are doing well. I mean, some might argue that you actually perform better financially if you've got a sound supply chain and good governance in place. And if you look at that from a M&A perspective, if you look at that from a pre-IPO perspective, positioning yourself to be ready to be evaluated or tell your story in a powerful way or seek access to capital from impact investors. Those are three areas that are huge within investment banking, not to mention the other thing I'm going to say I'm really positive about is private equity. The influence that those firms are looking at when they incorporate ESG principles into their portfolio companies has a huge effect on society. So those are just hopefully some anecdotal and or perspectives on how four very distinct business units come together around ESG.
Yes, I appreciate all that insight. I can see how different business lines are having pressures, regulations even, and different types of pressures and things that would cause them to specifically focus on this. Even on the private wealth management side, I specifically know people who avoid capital markets because they just can't get comfortable with funding something that they wouldn't be proud of. So I feel like we're solving for that now and actually creating things where the people with the most strict approach to investing and will have an opportunity to really feel good about and confident in how they're contributing. It's good for them to generate their future wealth and to grow their wealth, but they want to make sure and do it in a way that is certainly not negative and hopefully positive. So to really have the tools that you can believe that you can do that is really cool.
Yeah. And I mean, then you add on top of that, beyond the equities, like, green, sustainability, and social bonds that are being issued by sovereign and sub-sovereign entities, fixed income strategies as well. I mean, it really is going way beyond the public markets into some interesting spaces. Yeah. You could build an entire portfolio beyond your equities that is aligned to your value system.
And to your point before, just about, the financial returns, I think we've talked a lot on this podcast, if it's causation, correlation, coincidence, and you can still get different schools of thought. But even just in the circles that we're running in, I think people will definitely agree, all things equal, not sacrificing returns. Let's do the right thing. Let's be sustainability and ESG minded. But I'm starting to see the first folks that were saying, was an event I attended in New York recently, where, of course, European based fund, but they were saying that they will actually sacrifice some returns in exchange for the risk mitigation that comes with making the more sustainably sound choice. So even if the return looks a bit smaller, if they're mitigating a ton of risk because they're making a smarter long-term investment, that's a trade-off that they're willing to make, which is just a perspective that, I hadn't seen before, because at the end of the day, returns are king, and that's what people are trying to do. So interesting to hear your perspective. And then obviously with these different business units that you talked through with regards to your own organization at William Blair, the push and pull within an organization is real no matter what, even if there aren't multiple business units, even if it isn't a big company, it could just be a push and pull between personalities or philosophies or executive leadership wanting to do different things or believing in, different things, or, where the return, any plethora of things. So you've been through that. You've personally probably been in the crossfires, the crosshairs of that, and you've navigated it. So what advice would you give to, a firm that's perhaps just starting off? How would you encourage them to address the conflicting viewpoints between business units or personalities, having the hindsight that you have?
Yeah, perfect. Well, on your first comment, thank you for elevating the importance of the long-term view. It's so hard, when you're a publicly traded company, to avoid the quarterly earning pressure. Even I remember putting together a CSR report and then taking a breath for a month and then working on the next CSR report. So I think companies are actually just educating their shareholders more about the benefit of that long-term value creation. I think we're going to see more of that. There's a lot of data out there at the GIN and others that are tracking the performance of companies for either scoring well or have strong ESG programs. But we do kind of talk about it from the carrot and the stick perspective. Some of this is just how you govern and how you operate, and which might be the stick. And some of it is the carrot, which is wow, how do we optimize our human capital and how do we make a difference? And by the way, because we do these initiatives, the tenure of our workforce in a workforce that is, increasingly leaving, is actually going to benefit us from a profit perspective. So I thank you for bringing up that long-term perspective. I think some of it is just how corporations talk about their performance. And of course, keeping an eye on things like B certs and B Corps and those companies that have now mandated measures around that social and financial return, which we think is quite interesting. The push and the pull, it's kind of this conversation. I think I've used it like cart, horse, egg, different scenarios. I am so lucky to work at a firm where this is authentically part of our DNA and our culture. I never doubt for a second that this isn't on the minds of our leaders because they're talking about it. They live it. I aspire to their values and the mission, vision, values that they've created for our workforce to employ in our everyday lives. People say top down, bottom up. It really has to be, and I hate to use this word organic, but it has to be authentic and it has to be organic. So even sometimes the patience that we might ask people in our pursuits, only because we might have 50 great programs, but we're trying to prioritize which ones are going to have the biggest impact on the community, or we're trying to figure out the data sets that we can confidently measure and set goals around and then hold ourselves accountable for those goals. The long-term view is just as important when you're inside a privately held company like William Blair. We want to put things out there. We want to measure what matters. And in the meantime, maybe our alphabet soup is that we're just doing a lot of really good stuff and we've got to get it organized and centralized and prioritized. But I think for those companies that do have the leadership, that are those who are authentic, who are living diversity inclusion in their own lives and at work, who are prioritizing climate, who are employing good governance, that's always going to be something to aspire to. And then really investing in the business to build the internal operations of an ESG program is vital. And then quite honestly, just inspiring employees to be a part of it. And I use that word inspiring purposefully. Our foundation's mission is to inspire the next generation of philanthropists. This isn't, you might need a code of conduct or you might need a policy. But at the end of the day, we want people coming to work who are motivated and inspired to make our communities, our firm, and our clients stronger and better. So I think it's an interesting recipe. And I don't know that it's a one size fits all, but if you've got some of those ingredients, Helee, the company is going to be in good shape. And they're probably focused on the right things and really earnestly so.
Yeah, I love the word authentically done. I always refer to kind of the story of search engines like Google, and back in the day, you could kind of outsmart them to get people to come to your website, right? Like you put this this word in there a lot, or you hide this in there, and as those things have gotten smarter, you can't fake them out anymore. You truly have to be an authentic business that has connections. People have to view things that they're viewing on your website and things that they're reading for a certain amount of time. It has to connect to others. So this whole idea of being authentic and being challenged if you're not, or just being, it's too transparent if you're not authentic, I think is very is the right way to say it. So I'm glad to see that we're having more conversations with organizations, and because of individuals in leadership positions that authentically think this way and want this to be a thread in their organizations. So 15 years ago, it was more like, do we do this, or is this a thing, or what's it called, or do we not care? It's absolutely only about the return. 15 years ago, it was literally like, leave me alone with this. And now it's very organic and authentic often. Even though we are building frameworks and trying to provide guidance, and there's things that you have to follow. So we've got leaders that are inspiring and people that you're believing in, and that's all very important and key, and it seems to be very helpful to what you need to do. Are there any specific challenges when you talk then about implementing ESG, maybe even internally at a financial services firm? You mentioned some positive things with private equity, or how they build solutions and build this into their capital and their principles. Any other challenge? We talked, I think, a lot about some of them. Any other challenges you want to mention, or tips that you can give when it comes to working ESG into financial industry?
Yeah, I mean, maybe just dovetail a little bit on your point. So I think there's the leaders at the top, but listening to your leaders at all levels of the organization and really involving employees in the process. I think sometimes people tend to think very clearly about governance, right? Like all companies are thinking about the G, and maybe if we just categorize this a little bit. I think the E is pretty clear when people are looking at carbon accounting and carbon footprint. I think the S is really dynamic and important. And while it might be one of the harder things to measure, it's the first place you should start to engage your own workforce in. And I think it's not a challenge, Ryan. It's really an opportunity. So for instance, at William Blair, one of the first things that we did is we started an ESG working group. And we got employees together from across all business units. There wasn't an agenda. We didn't have a roadmap yet. We weren't working with Adobe, but it was to kind of bring this together and talk about the different perspectives on the client priorities around the opportunities for ESG to manifest both in the community and for our clients and in our business. And it was really kind of through that collective that we became really good and strong and created a foundation that goes back to that authenticity, because the employee's voice was in the process. And I can't tell you how many times, we've interviewed or hired someone and they've said, wow, you've just got an incredible business resource group, or your culture just seems like it's something I can really thrive in, or, I admired diverse talent that I was able to interview with throughout this process. So there's the expectation, and we look at things like RFPs and who clients want to do business with. But if you can reach within your S, and if you can engage your employees in this process early on, you're probably going to overcome a lot of the challenges. Because what you don't want to do is create a roadmap, and all of a sudden you're like, hello, here's our ESG roadmap, employees go, right? Because it's really, at the end of the day, an individual approach to this. So involve the S, involve the human capital, involve them before you have a plan, so you've got partnership throughout the process. And I think you're going to overcome a lot of challenges through that methodology.
I like it.
So I might shift gears a bit with this next topic. You guys, William Blair, your investment management group, joined UNPRI in 2011. So that's definitely cutting edge, if not bleeding edge, very early on, over a decade ago. So what have you seen over the last decade that, since making that decision? Has it been beneficial? Is it something you'd do again? What again have you gleaned just having that kind of first mover advantage there?
Yeah, I think we used the word continuum at the beginning, or journey, right? You kind of position yourself to make a commitment towards knowing that when you do that, this is going to continue to evolve. It might become more stringent, more people are going to join, there's going to be broader expectations around this. And I think it's a wonderful way to both innovate and hold yourselves accountable for the ESG integration. It's an evolution of thinking around this, right? Like, are you going to prioritize ESG? Yes. Are you going to engage shareholders and stakeholders and start to incorporate this into your processes? Yes. Are you going to hold others accountable for their ESG commitments? And how are you going to integrate that into their performance, whether they be, clients or companies that we cover or suppliers, right? So you kind of go down this path. 10, 15 years ago, I would say, you probably aspire, ascribe, or sign things because it's the right thing to do. But I think when you see firms now, like so many that have signed the PRI and other commitments, they're doing this because they have a vision for how this is going to help themselves and other people perform better in ESG. And I think it was maybe more singular back in the day, and it's become more of a collective now, and we like that trend a lot.
That makes sense. So what are you most excited about? You have a new ESG officially in your role and your title. As you look at the next 12 months or the next couple years, what fires you up? What gets you out of bed in the morning? What are you most looking forward to and hoping to accomplish for William Blair?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. And on some levels it's daunting, right? Because you wake up every day and there's more complex issues and they're scaling in ways that are creating more inequities than we've ever seen before. And but at the same time, what makes me so excited is just the opportunity for this integrated approach and enterprise perspective on this moving forward. A lot of people say, don't let good be the enemy of great, right? Like let's help each other. Let's partner in this pursuit. Let's start somewhere. We're starting from a great foundation. Our employees are magnificent, caring, committed, highly talented, intelligent individuals that collectively, I know we will look back on this firm in another 10 years and it will be wildly more productive even than it is today, which is kind of hard to believe. So, and hopefully we can inspire others to do that through our work. And that's what I love about William Blair and financial services is if you think about those 4 distinct areas that we talked about before, if we can help those 4 very specific stakeholder groups with this, you look at that is quite a tsunami effect on different industries, different clients, different stakeholders. So I'm excited for both the firm and our clients who will be on this and accomplish this journey together.
I like that, and I think it's just good advice too, or just a good note to end on is like start where you are. Like don't let perfection be intimidating or don't feel behind it. Just the cheesy line is the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And I think people with regards to the space, they're very forgiving. So, it's good to hear that from an industry leader as well, that just, no shame, start where you are. If you can do something good, that's better than doing nothing at all. So I think that that's absolutely correct. And nowadays, of course, there are plenty of partners to help you, right? If you truly have no idea what to do, where to go, what to do, navigate the alphabet soup, where to start, certainly firms like Gobi and others are willing to help, but mostly Gobi, of course.
But how you bring people together, your point is well taken. Like we're not in this alone, we're here to collaborate. We look towards companies like yours to be our experts and partners in this pursuit. So we're not each company might be very different, but we're not alone in this.
Yeah, and not all companies have the luxury of having a full-time dedicated person to philanthropy or ESG. In a lot of cases, especially in the mid-market, it's the head of investor relations that's has to wear this hat, or In the real estate world, we saw over the past decade, it was the head of asset management or property management that's like, oh, by the way, can you lead our green team? So yeah, there's all different use cases, and can be done.
Yes, and I have a great organic story about how we bring people together that I want to tell in a minute as part of a game that we want to play real quickly before we let you go, Laura. But first, I do want to say again, thank you very much for joining and for telling the story of the journey that you're on. And thank you for all the work that you're doing throughout your career at different places. And then the things that William Blair is doing are just really cool and innovative and refreshing. So thank you very much for doing that and for sharing your time and your story today. It's very much appreciated. With that, this is in addition to the great conversation, everyone tunes in all the way to the end for this incredible competition in the world of craft and artists and things. I'm going to say the name of something, and all you have to do is guess. Do they make beans, coffee, or beer? Beans or beer, it's called. Is this a coffee place or a craft beer place? That's all you got to do is guess which one it is by the name. It is called Two Brothers.
Beans.
Sorry, it is beer.
I would have guessed that too, though. I actually would have. So
let me tell the story here. It's in Warrenville, Illinois, not too far away. It's currently featured a couple of their beers at Jefferson Tap, which is in the Fulton River District in the city of Chicago. So I had to dig this up, but at Jefferson Tap, they used to host a thing called Green Drinks. And this was a national thing, but it did quite well in Chicago. 60, 75 people would come to this thing, but it was called Green Drinks. This was back in like 2009, 2010. So this was a way that like there was a group of people in the city that wanted to have these type of conversations and share professionally what they were doing and talk about sustainability. And then like green was the main word. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I never would have been to Jefferson Tap had it not been for Green Drinks and someone saying, I think you're into this. Why don't you come to this thing? And next thing you know, there's it went from 10 people, and the next time there was 20, and then 100 people. And now it's, there's amazing job titles with ESG in it. So
I love it. Well, in Chicago, we love our green rivers and our green beer for St. Patrick's Day. So to know that this far transcends that day is very inspirational, Ryan.
Good.
I was going to say both. Both? Can you say both?
Touche. Yeah,
you're probably right.
There are some caffeines brewed into beers. I know that.
Yeah, I remember those too, going to those. It was long before there was a nationally syndicated podcast with tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of listeners, the ESG Experience. Yeah.
Well, here's a toast to that and to you both for hosting this great podcast today. You'll have that many followers in no time, for sure.
That's right.
Especially
if
you offer beer at the end.
Well, thank you, Laura, and thank you to our listeners for joining us on this episode of the ESG Experience podcast. There's a new episode every month, so if you did enjoy your time with us, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast directory. Our next guest will be Susan Hunt-Stevens of WeSpire, and we will discuss driving purpose within a business, even with an increasingly remote-first workforce. Ooh, I look forward to that one. It's hot button issues all over. But yes, thank you to our tens of thousands of international loyal subscribers for continuing to listen and support our podcast. And do continue the conversation between episodes. Follow us on your favorite social media channel at #ESG Experience. And we'll catch you next time.